Brad Bartholomew Owen was born on April 1st, 1978, in a barn on the Owen family farm in Des Moines, Iowa. The youngest of 12 siblings, Brad led an inauspicious life as a youth. He was an average student, spending the humid summer months baling hay, and his best friend was a sheep named Sean. But everything changed one day when Brad was 13. While scrummaging for porn in his father's closet, Brad came across a video game called Hoyle Casino. It offered a virtual casino experience, including a simulation of the Cadillac of all gambling games, No Limit Hold'em. Brad was immediately hooked, and for the next 5 years he would play this game in between milking cows, dreaming of the day he could leave the Midwest and rub shoulders with poker royalty in the gambling capital of the world, Las Vegas. And at the tender age of 18, this dream became a reality. Brad secretly sold the family's last pig, Wilbur, and bought a one-way bus ticket to Sin City. With just a few buy-ins in his pocket, the countless hours spent practicing on Hoyle Casino paid off, as Brad was able to quickly spin up his bankroll by exploiting drunk tourists and broken-down fathers who had mortgaged the family home. Convinced that he had found his calling, Brad wasn't just getting by like the olden days on the farm. He was thriving. He started documenting his play, posting videos on YouTube, and with his boyish good looks and wholesome charm, he was able to quickly amass over 600,000 subscribers, with each of his videos garnering hundreds of thousands of views. But the brightest lights often burn out the fastest, and Brad Owen was no exception. Rumors swirled around the Vegas party scene of week-long benders fueled by drugs, booze, and strippers. Brad's poker earnings and YouTube revenue couldn't keep up with his extravagant lifestyle, and suddenly he found himself owing a 7-figure debt to the Chinese triads. Facing the potential of a lifetime of indentured servitude, Brad decided to make a last-ditch effort to salvage his career and his life. He scraped together one last buy-in to play in the biggest game of his life on the inaugural stream for the Lodge in Austin, Texas.
Bring it up, motherfucker.
We're giving the Jewish people a bad name last night. Why is
I give Jewish people a bad name every fucking night, okay? Let's not differentiate last night from any night.
It was right before.
My rabbi sits there and says, I wish you were not Jewish. What can I tell you?
Okay.
Careful, guys. Listen. You saw what they did.
So we start off playing 50-100 with a $100 ante and a $200 straddle. The action folds around to Freddy in the cutoff, and he raises it to $600, and Brad cold calls on the button. So ordinarily, I don't think Brad makes this play with 9-7 suited, but with his boys Doug and Andrew behind him that are unlikely to squeeze, this appears to be an exploitative move to take advantage of the absolute muppet raising 5-3 off in middle position. So neither of these plays are going to be solver approved, but for purposes of our analysis, we're going to give Ernie a button opening range and Brad a big blind calling range, which seems somewhat reasonable.
You guys got the stream.
I know.
Take it easy, chat. Brad got shot here, not going anywhere, in position. Easy spot for Brad to stab here. Bet the turn and bet the river. Freddy might not go anywhere here with the 5, especially because Brad had 8 here, might check back with the 8. He has a queen, queen jack, king queen.
See if they have the grand reserve.
Flush draw misses on the river. 6-7 misses on the river. Brad's got to go for it with his 9-7. Not sure it's going to get through.
Oh wait, Andrew, come back, Andrew, come back, come back.
So making a big bet here.
No, I have 42. Go get it. Paul's got minions. 10 minions, Paul. You know what? I'm done. I get on Doug next. All right, nice. Then you're on Freddy and Turbo. Doug, get into this. Barry, you're in the bottom.
Great.
Oh my goodness.
Great call by Freddy.
Freddy makes the call.
Yeah, Brad representing queen jack, king queen, 2 pair.
So from a theory perspective, Brad bluffing here is mandatory. He has just 9 high, and he isn't blocking busted flush draws or possible ace-x floats. However, this simulation assumes that Brad is playing against a rational human being. And facing this bet, a rational human being should fold some of his weaker hands, such as 8x, 5x, and middling pocket pairs. Now, I don't know much about Ernie, but when someone opens the cutoff with 5-3 off, 500 big blinds deep in a straddled pot, you have to question whether he even knows that folding is an allowed move in poker. So although bluffing here is the solver recommended play, perhaps giving up could have also been a viable option. So in this next hand, Under the Gun opens with ace deuce of diamonds, and Ernie's brother Bert cold calls in +2 with king 4 off. Brad looks down at ace 9 of clubs and decides to squeeze, and both Barry and Bert come along. The flop is 10-6-4 with 2 clubs. Brad c-bets small, Barry folds, and then this happens.
Who's what?
Oh, no.
Oh my God!
What? This guy's
Snap,
crazy,
rips
bro.
it,
I have 4.
and Brad
What's
calls.
Coos doing?
Oh my God! It's a flip here. It's 50-50. I mean, the fours right now are the best hand.
$50,000 pot. The king.
Needs a club and a club only. He
Oh!
fixes it. Finally one for Brad. $55,000. We're running it twice. Can he scoop it?
Needs another club.
Chop.
So fortunately, Brad ends up chopping the pot because if he lost both boards to king 4 off, he would have likely committed suicide. But how was Brad's play in this spot? Well, it's impossible to say for sure since a solver for donkeys hasn't been invented yet, but his line was probably fine in theory. That being said, I think you have to question whether it would have been possible for Brad to avoid this situation entirely. You had an under the gun open and an early position cold caller, and you're in the cutoff with 3 players yet to act. Is this really the ideal spot to put your chips into play? Think about it, much of the EV you get from squeezing with ace 9 is from fold equity. So when your opponents don't even know where the fold button is, much of that EV evaporates. This means that although Brad's play here was likely okay, there is an argument for waiting to find better spots in volatile situations like this, for example by folding ace 9 suited, but squeezing with ace 10 suited or ace 5 suited instead. And if it wasn't completely obvious at this point that these degenerates weren't capable of folding, that stark reality was driven home in this next hand. +1 opens to $800, both the hijack and button call, and then Brad looks down at pocket 9s in the big blind. So Brad certainly could just call here, but instead he decides to rip it in to steal all of that dead money. Now, is Brad likely ahead of these clowns who have 75% plus ranges? Sure. But little did Brad know that one of said clowns didn't even know that he was playing poker, and instead he thought he was playing blackjack.
Is Coos gonna— No! What is going on in this state? What is happening?
3-way
What
all
the hell?
in. Oh, there's no way Brad's not
He just
survived,
put $100,000 in.
Good.
Needs to fade an ace, jack, or 10. Brad with the best hand multi-way. This is $82,000.
Don't do it to him like that, Coos. Come on.
Oh my God.
No, you see the sensor there.
No.
Pump fake. You see it already, chat. Brad doesn't know. Oh my God.
2 times.
Taylor
2
put the
times,
flop on the
please.
sensor, so we know when the jack 10's there.
I need a drink.
No! No!
R.I.P.
No.
R.I.P. Brad. Chat knows. Brad doesn't know. He's about to see it.
Oh my God.
Looking for a 9
Queen!
and a queen now. Jacks and kings. And Brad has been felted on hand number 134.
Coos is a one-man wrecking crew.
At this point, I think many in Brad's shoes would have just called it a night and cut their losses short. But toiling away on a farm for most of his life instilled within Brad a rugged grittiness that most men do not possess. And as everyone that plays poker for a living knows, variance is very real. This means that in order to succeed, you must persist through the droughts, because eventually, if you keep plugging along, playing your game, inevitably things will turn around. You just gotta bide your time and wait for the perfect moment to strike.
And Brad has ace-jack,
Oh,
and
no.
he makes the call dominated
No.
and crushed.
No!
Trying to get unstuck.
no.
The table's rooting for Brad.
What is going on? Look at Brad. He's ready to... No.
Can we get a jack one time? For goodness sake.
$88,000 pot. Brad is all in. Worst hand. Ace jack.
One
versus
time
ace
for
king.
blood.
Chip.
Even Coos
No.
is rooting for him. Get some more outs. For a
Oh
chop.
my God.
check mark for coups. No chop outs come, no jack comes. Brad has been felted.
So now the stakes have increased to 200, 400 with a $400 ante, and Taras, who served as the real-life inspiration for the comic book guy from The Simpsons, opens the button with 7-6 off, and Brad calls in the big blind with ace-5 off. The flop comes Jack 4-6, Taras c-bet small, and then Brad raises. So from a game theory perspective, this is actually a very advanced play. Comic book guys should be c-betting quite aggressively with the ante preflop, as the big blind's range will be very wide. This in turn gives the big blind an incentive to check raise heavily to fold out the plentiful trash in the button's range. Ace-5 out of position doesn't really have a ton of equity, which makes just calling a bit uncomfortable, and with the ace of spades and the 5, not only is Brad blocking many of the button's continues, if his bluff is called, there's a decent possibility that he'll have additional opportunities to win the pot down the line with his double backdoors. So comic book guy calls with his middle pair, and just when you thought Brad's night couldn't get any worse, the turn is another 6. This isn't the best card for Brad because in theory he shouldn't be check raising with many middle pairs, but comic book guy should have plenty of 6x in his range. But nevertheless, Brad is undeterred and he fires again, this time with around a 70% pot bet. In theory, this isn't a horrible play with the ace of spades since he'll have a great bluffing candidate if the flush comes in on the river, but on this double flush, relatively connected board, Brad does have plenty of higher equity bluffing candidates that he could continue with instead. So checking here with Brad's specific hand is probably the best play. The river is the 3 of hearts, and one thing you have to admit about Brad is that the kid's got heart as he makes another 3/4 pot bet. Similar to the turn, I don't think this is the worst play in the world, as he likely has limited showdown value and he's blocking 5-7 and 5-6. But we have to keep in mind that this is a live stream. And according to the runner of the biggest live stream in the world, there are 2 types of players that they deliberately seek out to fill these lineups: women and really bad fish that give a lot of action. And although I don't want to assume the gender of someone named Taras, given the full beard, I'm leaning towards the latter. Now, I don't think this means that you shouldn't bluff at all against these types of players, because even half brain-dead morons will eventually recognize that you are a nit. But at a minimum, you should probably elevate the cutoff point for your bluffing candidates, and holding the ace of spades in particular is not great since it blocks a good chunk of comic book guys' folding range. That all being said, because this is a mandatory calling spot against this bet, of course comic book guy makes the horrific fold.
Funny, we were at the hospital. My wife was giving birth, and every time I went in the elevator, it was always the elevator, so I was like, go check in and see if Otis is out yet, or we're gonna push and have Otis out, and then I go to the Otis elevator, I see Otis everywhere, I'm like, oh my god, it's like weird. It's a sim, right? We're living in a sim.
Brad with big slick suited. He's starting to heat up. Just come like back in the bunker.
You start to see like the other dads that are like,
Yeah, just saw that 9s versus 8s, huh?
Oh.
So you start to like, I was thinking it was there for 3 days. And you just see like
Terrace
the
4 bets to
games,
10K. Brad going nowhere with big slick suited.
Congratulations, by the way. Oh, you see, like, all the women are just like.
Nice shot at Brad right here.
The women are in the rooms because they can't. Yeah, they can't leave. Yeah.
Here it comes.
Puts in the 5 bet. What's Terrace going to do here with these suited 10-7? Already invested 10K. What is it, 17K more to go? Time to surrender, you'd imagine.
Like, now it's on.
Out of position, calling a 5 bet with 10 high.
Oh my goodness.
Makes the
Makes
call.
the call with 10-7 suited.
So likely still steaming from being absolutely embarrassed by Brad in the prior hand, comic book guy seeks his revenge, apparently committing himself not to fold against Brad no matter what, even if that means calling a $27,000 5 bet with 10-7 suited. The flop comes 10-6-9, Brad makes a small c-bet, and comic book guy rips it with his top pair plus gut shot.
And that's going to shut it down. Brad cannot continue when Terrace goes all in here. I mean, for all of it, calling it off with ace high. Brad staring across the table, trying to get a read on Terrace. Makes the call.
Oh my goodness.
$192,000 here.
Now I have no idea what Brad's 5-bet range versus donkeys looks like, but you would have to imagine that he has better calling candidates than this. Sure, he has 2 overs and some backdoors, but for all we know, comic book guy could have 2 pair, a set, or a straight. And this I think highlights one of the dangers of trying to play a max exploit game in a live environment with extremely volatile players. It becomes very easy to end up leveling yourself by playing down to the abilities of your competition, which in this game essentially means devolving into a battle of monkeys flinging poo. Case in point, in this last hand, Jersey Shore opens the hijack and Brad calls in the small blind with King 7 suited. With the straddle in play, this is just a pure fold and it's not even close. But it can be very tempting to open up your range when you have utter donuts raising with random bullshit in all positions. But we have to keep in mind that poker is an unforgiving bastard. Even the donuts get an equal distribution of good cards, so playing very marginal hands can be quite tricky because even against bad players, they tend to put you in very marginal spots, like the one Brad is facing here. He thinks he's ahead after the check back on the turn and puts in a small value bet on the river, only to have Jersey Shore fist pump it back into his face with a gigantic raise. Brad appears more confused than Phil Hellmuth playing deeper than 40 big blinds, and he ends up folding, which is probably the right play. But that's not much solace when you are on your 11th losing session in a row in what you thought was an absolute dream spot against a bunch of farm animals.
Down in a